In 1978, a man named Don Refugio Vasquez built a house in San Antonio for $14,000. 48 years later, his grandchildren still walk past the same Virgen candle and sit on the same plastic-covered couch. Number 12 is the wooden spoon his abuela carried from Monterrey in 1952. Number 7 is a crocheted doily older than the street it sits on. Number 4 cost 90 cents at a Carniceria in 1980 and still hangs on the kitchen wall today. These 20 home features were not decoration. They were memory made solid. They were the way a Mexican family said, "This is who we are, and this is what we hand to our children." Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 20 Mexican home features we need to bring back. Number 20. Plastic-covered living room couches. The plastic was not about being cheap. It was about respect. Your abuela worked overtime at a laundry in East LA to buy that floral velvet sofa from Levitt's in 1979. It cost $389, and it was supposed to last her the rest of her life, so she covered it. The clear vinyl went on the day the delivery truck pulled away, and it stayed on for the next 40 years. You can still spot this in your tia's house in Boyle Heights. The plastic squeaked when you sat down. It stuck to the back of your legs in July. It made a sound like a paper bag every time your primo flopped on it after school. Mexican mothers across South Texas understood something simple. The couch was alive. It had a job. It was for company, for the priest who came once a year, for the comadres after a baptism. The plastic was not embarrassing. It was a kind of love that worked harder than anything we make today. Number 19. The Virgen de Guadalupe candle sat on the kitchen counter. The glass was tall and clean, and the wick burned slow. Abuela lit it the night before any test, any surgery, any long drive. The flame was the first thing you saw walking into the kitchen at 6 in the morning, and the last thing you saw before bed. In 1982, the candle cost about $1 at the Carniceria on the corner of Zarzamora Street. The wax was cheap, and the printed Tilma image was pressed onto the glass with cheap ink. Yet that candle did more for a Mexican household than any alarm system ever could. It said the house was watched. It said somebody bigger than the rent and the bills was paying attention. Mama Lupita kept hers burning for 9 straight days when Tio Beto was deployed in 1991. The kitchen smelled like beeswax and warm air. The Virgen never moved. Generations of Mexican families learned to pray standing at the stove, stirring frijoles with one hand and holding a rosary with the other. Number 18. Brass sombrero wall art. Yes, the giant brass sombrero with the etched cactus and the little burro standing under a palm tree. It hung above the television in nearly every Mexican home in Pharr, Texas, in 1979. Tio Memo bought his at a swap meet in McAllen for $8 and half a tank of gas. The brass was thin and bent if you pressed too hard, but it shined when the afternoon sun came through the front window. To us, it was beautiful. It was a piece of the rancho on the wall in a country that did not always feel like home. Mexican families did not put up brass sombreros because they were tacky. They put them up because they were proof that the old country was still inside the new house. The brass got dusty. Abuelita wiped it down every Saturday with a damp dish towel. The etching faded over the decades. The sombrero stayed. Number 17. The Velvet Last Supper painting. The frame was thick, gold plastic, and the velvet was the color of midnight. Jesus and the apostles were painted in cheap white and gold paint that looked alive when the lamp was on. Every Mexican home in East LA had one above the dining table in 1976. Abuela bought hers from a man selling them out of a station wagon at the corner of Whittier Boulevard for $12. The painting was not just decoration. It was a reminder that the dinner table was sacred. You did not yell at this table. You did not start eating before grandfather said grace. The velvet caught the light and made the whole sala feel warm, even when the heater was broken. Some families had Selena painted on velvet, some had a horse, most had Jesus. The velvet absorbed 40 years of carne asada smoke and abuela's perfume and never once lost its glow. Pause for 1 second. Number 16. The ceramic rooster collection on top of the fridge. There were always at least 9 of them. A big red one from a flea market in San Antonio. A small blue one Tia Lupe brought back from a trip to Guadalajara in 1981. One missing a tail feather because Primo Memo knocked it off in 1987, and Abuela glued it back together with Elmer's school glue. Mexican grandmothers across the Rio Grande Valley believed roosters brought good fortune to the kitchen. The fridge top was the altar. The roosters watched over the masa, the comal, the simmering pot of beans. You were not supposed to touch them. You were definitely not supposed to play with them. Abuela knew the position of every single one, and she would notice if you moved a single rooster a quarter of an inch. The collection grew by 1 or 2 birds every Christmas. By the time Abuela passed in 2008, there were 47 of them, and not one was thrown away. Her granddaughter took them home and put them on top of her own fridge in Houston. Generations of Mexican kitchens, watched over by the same proud little roosters. Number 15. The Avon perfume bottle collection on Mom's dresser. The Avon lady came on Tuesday afternoons. Her name was Rosa, and she carried a thick paper catalog and a black plastic case full of samples. Mama Lupe ordered a new perfume bottle every month, and it cost $4.50 in 1983. The bottles were shaped like cars, owls, swans, little birds, even a tiny Cadillac with real chrome wheels. They lined up on the dresser like a parade. The perfume inside was topaz, or sweet honesty, or charisma. Mama only used them on Easter Sunday and quinceañeras. The rest of the year, the bottles were just to look at. Mexican mothers in Boyle Heights kept those Avon bottles for decades. The perfume dried up in 1992, but the bottles stayed. They were proof that Mama had her own beautiful things, even when there was barely enough money for groceries. Today, those same bottles sit in a glass cabinet at her daughter's house in Pomona, untouched, the labels faded, the chrome still shining. Number 14. The crocheted doily under everything. Under the lamp, under the rotary phone, under the porcelain Virgen, under the bowl of plastic fruit, under the ashtray Tio Beto used twice a year. Doilies were everywhere. Abuela Carmela in Brownsville crocheted her own using a tiny silver hook and a spool of cotton thread that cost 40 cents in 1974. She made one for every flat surface in the house, and then she made another one for the new daughter-in-law, and then one for the comadre down the street. The pattern was usually a pineapple or a star or a snowflake. Each one took her 3 nights of television watching to finish. Mexican grandmothers passed crochet down through the women in the family the way other people pass down silver. The doilies were not just pretty. They were a record of the hours Abuela spent loving her family with her hands. You could read the whole life of a Mexican household by counting the doilies. The thicker the cotton, the older the doily. The yellower the thread, the more decades of cooking smoke had passed over it. When Abuela died in 2014, her granddaughter found 73 doilies tucked into a cedar drawer, each one folded in half, each one waiting for a new home. She took them all back to her apartment in San Antonio and laid them out on every flat surface she owned. The lamps got doilies again. So did the rotary phone she kept just for show. So did the new bowl of plastic fruit. The doilies were back where they belonged. The hands that made them were gone, but the love was alive in every stitch. There is something a doily says that no factory-made placemat ever will. It says somebody who loved you sat in a chair for 3 nights and made this with their hands so your lamp would have a soft place to stand. That is not decoration. That is a small monument to a kind of patience we do not make anymore. Pause for 1 second. Number 13. The sala formal, the room nobody was allowed in. In Laredo in the 1980s, every Mexican home had 2 living rooms. There was the regular one, where the kids watched cartoons and Tío Beto fell asleep on Sundays. And there was the sala. The sala had the plastic-covered couch, the velvet painting, the porcelain figurines, the photo of grandfather in his army uniform from 1953, and the Virgen statue. You were not allowed inside it. The door was always cracked open just enough to see in, but not enough to actually walk through. The sala was for the priest, for funeral viewings, for the day your daughter brought home her novio for the first time. It was for company in the deepest sense of the word. Abuela vacuumed it every Saturday for 50 years, even though nobody ever sat there. The carpet still had the lines from the vacuum tracks when she passed. Mexican families understood that some rooms in a house were not for living. They were for dignity. They were the proof that even a one-income family from the colonia could have a beautiful room they kept ready for the world. Number 12. The beaded curtain doorway between the kitchen and the sala. The beads were wooden and painted, sometimes orange and yellow and brown. They hung from a wooden rod above the doorway, and they made a sound when you walked through them, a kind of soft rattle that told the whole house somebody was coming. In 1977, you could buy one at the Pick and Save in Whittier for $6.99. Tío Memo had one in his house in San Fernando Valley for 31 straight years. The beads collected dust. They tangled when the screen door slammed shut. They made a sound abuela could hear from the bedroom, which is exactly why she loved them. No Mexican mother in 1979 needed a baby monitor. She needed a beaded curtain. The bead doorway said this house has rhythm. It has a sound. It announces itself. When the curtain finally fell apart in 2008, Tío Memo nailed it back together with thumbtacks. He could not stand a doorway that did not click when you walked through it. Number 11. The Cedar hope chest with the quinceañera dress inside. Every Mexican daughter in San Antonio in the 1980s had one. Her grandfather Don Refugio built it by hand in 1979. Out of cedar planks he bought at a lumber yard on Frio City Road for $22. He sanded it smooth, lined it with old cotton sheets, and fitted brass hinges to the lid. Inside went the quinceañera dress, wrapped in white tissue paper. The crown went in after the party, the cake topper, the little Bible from her godmother, the faded photo of her court of honor, the silk flowers from her bouquet. The chest sat at the foot of her bed for the next 20 years. The smell was strong and clean, and it kept the moths away. When she got married in 1998, she opened the chest one last time and showed her own daughter the dress. The little girl touched the lace and asked if it was a princess dress. Mexican families did not store memories in photo albums alone. They stored them in cedar. Number 10. The crucifix above every bedroom doorway. The wooden cross was small, no bigger than your hand. The corpus was painted bronze. Abuela hung one above every doorway in the house, above the front door and above the bedrooms. She blessed each one with holy water on the day she put it up. In 1981, you could buy a small wooden crucifix at the Catholic gift shop on Commerce Street in San Antonio for $3.75. Mexican families believed the crucifix at the threshold protected the room and everyone who slept in it. You walked under it without thinking. You came home from school and ducked your head, and you were watched over. You went to bed at night, and your last sight was the cross above the door. It was not religion as performance, it was religion as architecture. The cross was part of the house the same way the faucet was part of the kitchen. Every Mexican kid in Boyle Heights or Brownsville or Pharr knew exactly where the crucifix hung in every room of their house. They could find it with their eyes closed. Number 9. The big wooden spoon hanging on the kitchen wall. La cuchara. It was carved from a single piece of mesquite, and it had a hole drilled in the handle so abuela could hang it on a nail by the stove. She used it for stirring frijoles, for tasting caldo, for waving in the air when she was telling a story. And yes, sometimes for the legendary swat across the back of your jeans when you sassed her. Abuela in Edinburgh, Texas paid a man at the pulga $2 for hers in 1976, and she used it every single day until she died in 2003. The wood was stained dark from 40 years of mole and beans. The handle was smooth from being held by the same hand for half a lifetime. Nobody else was allowed to touch the cuchara. Not Tío Beto, not the comadres, not the grandkids. It was hers. Mexican grandmothers had a relationship with their wooden spoons that bordered on sacred. The spoon knew what was in the pot before abuela did. It was an extension of her arm. It was the most humble tool in the kitchen and somehow the most powerful. When abuela passed, her granddaughter took the cuchara off the nail and brought it home to her own apartment in Austin. She hung it on her own wall above her own stove. She has never used it. She does not have to. It is enough that it is there. The truth is, every wooden spoon in a Mexican kitchen carried decades of meals and decades of memory. It carried the smell of Sunday. It carried the rhythm of a family that ate together, prayed together, and stayed together. The wooden spoon was the heart of the house. And when you walked into a Mexican kitchen and saw it hanging on the wall, you knew exactly what kind of family lived there. You knew the food was made with the patience. You knew the kids were watched over. You knew somebody had been standing at that stove for a very long time. There is something about a tool that lives on a nail for 40 years that no modern kitchen gadget can match. It is a kind of permanence we have lost. It is a small wooden monument to a way of feeding people that we used to know by heart. Number 8. The cloth tortillero on the dinner table. It was a round basket lined with a hand-stitched cotton cloth, usually with a chicken or a flower embroidered on the lid. The tortillas went in fresh off the comal, and the cloth kept them warm. Mexican families in San Diego, Brownsville, and Pilsen all had one on the table at every meal. Abuela's mother brought hers from Zacatecas in 1958 and used it every day until 1995. The fabric was washed, restitched, and patched 100 times. It still smelled faintly of corn. The tortillero was not just a basket. It was the center of the table. You reached in for a tortilla, and you were already part of the meal. There was no such thing as a Mexican dinner without one. Today, most families just toss the bag of store-bought tortillas on the table. The cloth tortillero is something we should bring back tomorrow. It costs nothing. It changes everything. Number 7. The pila in the backyard. The pila was a concrete laundry basin, waist-high, usually painted white or pale blue, sitting under a tin roof in the backyard. Abuela washed sheets in it. She washed her husband's work clothes in it. She washed the dog in it on a hot Saturday afternoon. The basin held about 30 gallons of water, and the soap she used was a brick of jabon zote that cost 12 cents in 1974. The pila was the engine of the household. It ran 6 days a week. The water came from a hose connected to the spigot on the side of the house. Abuelita stood there for 2 hours every morning, scrubbing collars and singing along to the radio inside. Mexican families in South Texas and the Rio Grande Valley built pilas because the indoor washer was a luxury. And even when they could afford one, Abuela still preferred her pila. It was hers. It was outside in the morning air. The clothes hung on a line, and they smelled like sunshine when she pulled them down at the end of the day. Number 6. Iron security bars on every front window. The wrought iron bars were welded into curly Qs, crosses, and stars. Every front window in East LA had them by 1985. Tio Beto in Boyle Heights paid a welder named Gilberto $80 to install his bars in 1983. The bars were not ugly. They were beautiful. They were wrought iron lacework over a stucco bungalow, and they made the house look like it was wearing jewelry. Mexican families understood the bars were protection, but they never let them be just protection. They were art. The welders in San Antonio competed to make the prettiest scrollwork. Some had a cross at the top. Some had the family initial. Some had a little bird in the corner. The bar said this house is loved enough to defend, and it is beautiful enough to dress up. You can still drive through the east side of LA and find houses where the iron bars are 70 years old and still as sharp as the day they went up. The paint is fresh. The welds are clean. The bars stayed because the love stayed. Number 5. The brick barbecue pit in the backyard. Tio Memo built his with his own hands in 1980. He bought 200 red bricks at a yard sale on Bandera Road for $50 and stacked them in a horseshoe under the mesquite tree. There was no recipe. There was no plan. He just knew where the smoke needed to go and how high the grill grate needed to sit. The pit ran on mesquite wood that cost nothing because Tio Beto cut it himself. Every Saturday for the next 30 years, that brick pit hosted carne asadas, barbacoa pits dug into the ground beside it, baptism parties, quinceañera lunches, and Sunday afternoons that turned into Sunday evenings. Mexican families in Houston and Phoenix built brick pits because the modern propane grill could not do what mesquite, smoke, and red brick could do. The pit was not a thing you bought. It was a thing you built. The mortar between the bricks was sometimes just packed mud. The grate was an old refrigerator shelf. None of it mattered. What mattered was that the pit was alive every weekend. Generations of Mexican kids grew up under the smoke from a brick pit that their grandfather laid by hand. That smoke is in their memory forever, the way a song is. Number 4. The religious calendar from the Carniceria. Every January, the Carniceria on the corner gave out a free calendar. The image at the top was always the Virgen de Guadalupe, the Sacred Heart of Jesus, or the Last Supper, painted in bright pinks and the golds and blues. The bottom half showed the days of the year in tiny black numbers. Abuela hung hers on a nail above the kitchen sink, and she wrote on it in pencil: birthdays, doctor appointments, the day her son was deployed, the day Tia Lupe came home from the hospital, the day the dog died. The Carniceria calendar was free, but it cost the Carniceria about 90 cents to print in 1980. Mexican families across San Antonio, Tucson, and Pueblo had the same calendar. Different butcher shops, same image. The calendar was a piece of the Carniceria living inside the kitchen. It was the way the neighborhood reached into your house. It was a small free gift that made your wall feel like home. When the year ended, Abuela folded the old calendar in half and put it in a drawer. She could not throw away an image of the Virgin, so she kept them all. 43 years of Carniceria calendars stacked in a kitchen drawer in Edinburgh, Texas, when her granddaughter finally went through the house in 2018. Each one was a year of her abuela's life, a year of pencil notes, a year of devotion. Number 3. The holy water font near the front door. It was a small white porcelain shell, about the size of your palm, mounted to the wall just inside the front door. Abuela filled it with holy water she brought home from Sunday Mass at Our Lady of Guadalupe in San Antonio. You dipped your finger in it on the way in and on the way out. You crossed yourself without thinking. The font was not optional. It was as much a part of the doorway as the doorknob. Mexican families bought theirs at the Catholic supply store on Commerce Street for $5.50 in 1981. The water dried up between mass days, and abuela refilled it from a mason jar she kept under the sink. Every Mexican kid in Boyle Heights and the Rio Grande Valley grew up dipping their finger in that little porcelain shell on the way out the door to school. The cool touch of the water on the forehead was the last loving thing that happened before the day began. It was an easy, free blessing that made the threshold of the house feel safe. We need to bring back the holy water font. It costs almost nothing, and it changes the way a doorway feels. Number 2. The hand-painted Mexican tile backsplash. The tiles came from Talavera, Mexico, painted in cobalt blue, yellow, and burnt orange. They cost about 90 cents a piece at the import store in San Antonio in 1979. Abuela tiled her own backsplash one weekend in October with her brother and a borrowed tile saw. The tiles never lined up perfectly, and the grout was uneven in places. It did not matter. The kitchen looked alive the moment it was done. Mexican families in El Paso and Tucson tiled everything they could reach: backsplashes, kitchen counters, bathroom walls. Talavera tile was a way of bringing the rancho into the new house in the new country. The blues and yellows reminded abuela of the chapel in her hometown of Cholula. Today, most kitchens have white subway tile or beige laminate. We need to bring back the Talavera. It is cheap. It is beautiful. It is a piece of Mexico on the wall every time you make breakfast. Number 1. The good plates kept for company forever. The good plates lived in the china cabinet in the sala. They were white with little blue flowers around the rim. Abuela bought the set at JCPenney in 1975 for $48 with green stamps she had been saving for 2 years. The plates came out twice a year: Christmas Eve and the day after Easter. The rest of the year they sat on the second shelf, behind glass, lined up like soldiers waiting. She washed them by hand and dried them with a clean dish towel and put them right back. 48 years later, the good plates are still in that cabinet in San Antonio. They have been used about 96 times in their entire lives. They are perfect, not a single chip, not a single crack. The little blue flowers are as bright as the day she unwrapped them. Mexican families understood something simple. Some things are not meant to be used every day. They are meant to be saved. They are meant to wait. They are the proof that even the smallest household can hold something beautiful in reserve. Something to bring out when the priest comes, when the daughter marries, when the grandchildren come home from college. The good plates are still alive in that cabinet in the sala. They are alive because they were saved. And that, more than anything, is the lesson the Mexican home was trying to teach us. Save the beautiful things. Use them when they matter. Hand them down when you can. The plates are not just plates. They are a quiet promise from one generation to the next that the family will still be sitting at the same table, with the same blue flowers, when the world has changed everything else. Generations of Mexican mothers in South Texas and East LA understood this without ever putting it into words. The good plates were a kind of faith. They believed there would be a tomorrow worth setting the table for. Here is my challenge. Walk through your house tonight and find one thing that came from your abuela. A doily, a wooden spoon, a brass cross, a Virgen candle, a single ceramic rooster. Hold it for a minute, then put it back where she would have wanted it. The truth is, every one of these home features was an act of love that worked harder than any modern decoration ever will. They were the bones of a family. They were how Mexican mothers turned a rented bungalow in San Antonio or a stucco apartment in Boyle Heights into a place the whole family knew was home. Share which Mexican home feature you still have in the comments. I want to know if the Virgen candle gets more love than the wooden spoon. I want to know whose abuela kept the most roosters on the fridge. Because these are not just home features. They are proof that the simplest things, lined up on a kitchen counter and watched over by the right pair of hands, can hold a family together for generations.